Welcome back, YouTube. Sensei Domino here. Welcome to the Spine Ticks After Party. Got some great stuff to share with you tonight. I have one TTM return, some friend mail, a few eBay pickups, and I'll also be showing another group of the Perez Steele Baseball Hall of Fame art postcards. But let's go ahead and get started. Let's start with the TTM. So this TTM comes from Seattle, Washington. The initials are LW. This is a NBA three-time Hall of Famer. This is my second return from this individual. And they did use the pouch. And it's Lenny Wilkens. And he signed all 5 of my cards. He signed a couple of these 89-90 NBA hoops. It's a little hard to see with the background on the card. But he's got a great looking autograph. He signed a couple of these 1991-92 Fleer. And he also signed the 92-93 Fleer. So thank you so much, Mr. Wilkens. All right. So next, we have some friend mail. And I did cut out the individual's address. This comes from Baltimore, Maryland. And this comes from Chris over at Chris Graphs 101. He says, glad to help a fellow collector. Enjoy. Chris, a.k.a. Chris Graphs 101. Thank you so much, Chris. And he sent me, I actually have to raise this up a little bit. He sent me one of the Hall of Fame art postcards signed by Happy Chandler. Great looking autograph there. I did show a Happy Chandler autograph a couple weeks ago on an index card. And after I showed Chris the index card, he actually showed me that he had a pair of these Hall of Fame art postcards signed by Happy Chandler. And I asked if he'd be willing to trade one of them since he had 2. And he was nice enough to just send me one, you know, just as a kind gesture. And so I really appreciate him doing that. Unfortunately, not that I mind too much, but unfortunately, if you look right here, there's like a cut into the envelope, and it did sort of clip the corner of the card a little bit. So, you know, the USPS needs to get their stuff straight, because this is sort of unacceptable. But yeah, I don't mind, and really appreciate Chris sending this to me, because I absolutely love these Hall of Fame art postcards by Dick Perez. They're just absolutely gorgeous. And as I mentioned when I showed my index card, Happy Chandler had a lot to do with Jackie Robinson breaking the color barrier, because he was appointed the commissioner of baseball right at the time that Branch Rickey signed Jackie Robinson to a minor league contract. And Happy Chandler could have avoided the contract, but he chose not to. And the rest is baseball history. So very important person in the history of Major League Baseball, and really happy to get another autograph of his into the collection. So thank you again, Chris. Really appreciate it. All right. So next, I'm going to be showing the last group of 1982 Topps cards that I received in an incredible care package from Eric at the Card Closet. And there are also a few other 1973 tops that I've been holding off showing because I actually haven't shown my 1973 Topps starter set. But I'll go ahead and kind of show those cards at the end of this to kind of segue into showing the 1973 starter set, which I'll be showing in a couple weeks. Let me kind of break this stack down into a couple of little stacks. There's probably about 150 cards here that I haven't shown yet. And as I usually do, I'll show the fronts and the backs of the first few cards, and then I'll just show the fronts since it's pretty much the same back. I'll go ahead and start with a Rick Russell. He's a pretty nice pitcher. He had well over 200 wins. Where was he at here? 133. But what I actually remember about Rick Russell is him giving up a home run to Bo Jackson in the 1989 All-Star Game. Bo Jackson just crushed the ball, and if I remember right, Ronald Reagan was actually in the booth, and he had a pretty incredible reaction. He was just like, whoa! And that always stands out. But Rick Russell gave up that home run, so that's what I remember most about Rick Russell. Next we have Al Holland. Yeah, that was a pretty cool moment to watch. Next we have Ed Romero. Next we have Ron Say, fantastic player. And a Ron Say in action. That's what the inactions look like. Next we have Dan Meyer. The great Don Baylor. Pat Kelly. Steve Stone. Mark Clear. Interesting stash there. Cliff Johnson. Stan Poppy. John Candelaria. This is a nice card. Orioles batting and pitching leaders. Eddie Murray, Sammy Stewart. Next we have Ron Oster. Lamar Hoyt. The great Vida Blue. Mike Scott. Alan Ashby. Hall of Famer Robin Yount. Joe Strain. Dave Righetti. This is his rookie. This might be his rookie card. I'm not sure. I think it might be, though. Jeff Burrows, former Ranger. Bruce Keeson, Mark Wagner, Terry Forster, Luis Aguayo, Ed Miller, Rick Langford, Tom Bergmeyer, Tim Stoddard, Jack Clark. Really enjoyed watching Jack Clark play. He's a nice player. Dave Chalk, Lee Mazzilli, Randy Lurch, Floyd Bannister, Kansas City Royals future stars. Biggest name here is probably Atlee Hammaker. Darryl Motley wasn't a bad player. Oscar Gamble, Ken Oberkfell, looking really enthusiastic about getting his photo taken. You don't see too many cards with a player smiling like that, so pretty cool. Steve Yeager, Roland Office, Glenn Hubbard, Yankees batting and pitching leaders, Jerry Mumphrey and Tommy John, Rick Dempsey laying down a bunt. That's pretty cool. Hall of Famer Dennis Eckersley. Great image there. Joe Price. Dennis Leonard. Dave Bergman. Now, this is a great card. Braves future stars with Steve Bedrosian and Brett Butler. Butler's a great TTM signer. Next we have Julio Gonzalez. Another nice card, Greg Nettles. And the Greg Nettles in action. I always liked this card because this was usually the card that they showed for the 82 set in the Beckett's back in the 80s and 90s. Fernando Valenzuela, second year card. Mark Bruhard. Garth Orge. Both him and his brother Dane are fantastic TTM signers. Glenn Adams. Billy Allman. Gary Gray. Ray Knight. Expos batting and pitching leaders, Warren Cromartie, Bill Gullickson. And I think Cromartie spent a few years over in Japan, if I remember right. Eventually got back to the majors. John Henry Johnson. Alan Ripley. We have the A's future stars. I think Rich Bordy is the only one I really know. Doug Capilla. Lou Piniella. Great player. Pretty good manager as well. Won a championship with the 90 Reds. Vern Rule. Hall of Famer Andre Dawson, the Hawk. Man, he's got a gorgeous signature. I still haven't sent off to him, but I really need to. Larry Christensen. Another nice player, Reggie Smith. Here are a few All-Stars. Rod Carew, Hall of Famer. Very underrated in the hobby. Willie Randolph. Bucky Dent. Jack Morris. Goose Gossage, another great TTM signer. John Tudor. Indians batting and pitching leaders, Mike Hargrove, former Ranger. Burt Blyleven, Hall of Famer. Bob Babcock. Glenn Abbott. This is a Hall of Fame name. Shooty Babbitt. I don't think I've ever heard of Shooty before. That's pretty cool. Next we have Rick Mailer. Tippy Martinez. Craig Swan. Billy Smith. Damaso Garcia. Bob Galasso. Next we have the White Sox future stars. Can't say I'm really familiar with any of these guys. Freddie Patek. Steve Rogers. Blue Jays batting and pitching leaders, John Mayberry, Dave Stieb. Yeah, Stieb had a ton of one-hitters before he got his no-hitter. Rick Sutcliffe. I watched quite a bit of Sutcliffe on WGN when he was with the Cubs. Next we have Gary Ward, former Ranger. Next we have Juan Eichelberger. Tim Foley. Love those uniforms. Those are great. Bill Campbell. Dennis Lamp. From what I've seen, he's a pretty good TTM signer too. Hall of Famer Fergie Jenkins. Those are probably my favorite Rangers uniforms. Not a big fan of the collar, though. That had to be tough to play with. Next, we have Randy Jones. Enos Cabell. Bill Travers. Johnny Walkenfuss. Joe Charbonneau. Gene Tennis. Brian Clark. Rick Camp. Steve Mira. Mike Scioscia. Frank White. Ken Clay. Guy that I PC, Carl Yastrzemski. Hall of Famer. And this is in action. I don't think I've ever seen this card. Steve Nicosia. Ed Whitson. I think he's a pretty good TTM signer as well, if I remember right. Fred Martinez. Dave Concepcion. Great player. Hector Cruz. Dan Spillner. Dale Murphy. Deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. Shout out to Zach Sports Cards and Collectibles. Do it for Dale. Mike Davis. Keith Drumright. Alfredo Griffin. Tom Paciorek, former Ranger. Sammy Stewart. Gary Matthews, Sarge. Hall of Famer Bert Blyleven. Leon Roberts. Larry Sorensen. Wayne Gross. Tony Scott. Brewers batting and pitching leaders. Cecil Cooper. Pete Vukovich. It's a nice card. Barry Foote. Mark Bombach. Next we have Gene Richards. Denny Martinez, El Presidente. Rick Miller. Dave Rosello. Sixto Lescano. Aurelio Lopez. Larry McWilliams. Reggie Cleveland, Dave Engel, the great Davy Lopes, Davy Lopes in action, Bob Shirley, Bill Buckner, Dave Smith, Ken Phillips, Tom Hume, Gorman Thomas, Richie Zisk, Goose Gossage, John Denny, Kevin Hickey, Grant Jackson, the great Pete Rose, Frank Tavares, Greg Harris, Boston Red Sox batting and pitching leaders, Carney Lansford, Mike Torres. Lansford was a really nice hitter. Woody Fryman, Checklist, and the last card, Frank Tanana. All right, let me go ahead and put these away. And the last group from this incredible care package is probably about 10 or so cards for my 1973 starter set, which, as I mentioned earlier, I haven't shown yet. These are a few of the cards that I needed. We'll start with Tom Hall. The quality control on some of these 70s sets was absolutely horrendous, so I don't mind too much about the centering issues with these sets. Hall of Famer Don Sutton. I sort of expect it. Sonny Seibert. We have the 72 stolen base leaders with Lou Brock and Bert Campaneris. Great card. Looks like Lou Brock had 63 steals. Joe Morgan had 58. Campaneris had 52. Dave Nelson was second in the American League with 51 for the Rangers. That's nice. Next we have the 1972 leading fireman, Clay Carroll, Sparky Lyle. Looks like Clay Carroll had 37 saves, Sparky Lyle had 35. Great card here, Raleigh Fingers. I believe this is his first card with his stash. I don't think he had a stash in 72. Next we have Carlos May. Lynn McLaughlin. Ron Fairley. Next we have Eddie Casco. Matty Alou. Next we have Hall of Famer Luis Aparicio, who I believe with Willie Mays' passing earlier this week, rest in peace, Mr. Mays. Luis Aparicio is now the oldest living Hall of Famer, if I remember right. Looks like he was born in 34. And the last card, Ben Ogilvy. So thank you again, Eric, for this absolutely incredible care package. As I said, you definitely helped me out an incredible amount with my starter sets. All right. So next, I actually showed this once before on the Overtime Hockey Show with DM and Perch, but haven't showed it on my channel yet. So I bought a huge lot. I think it was like 300 hockey cards or something like that, 300 vintage hockey cards. It's 70s to early 80s. Me personally, I don't call anything 80 plus vintage, but I understand when people do. There is almost half of the lot was 1982, 83 tops. So I'll actually save that for another video, but I'll go ahead and show the other cards that came in the lot. There are a few Hall of Famers. We'll go ahead and start with, I guess this is 1973-74. We have the Pittsburgh Penguins team card. All right, next here's a Hall of Famer, Rod Gilbert. Next, moving on to 1974-75. And here's a few Hall of Famers. We have Jacques Lemaire. Card's in pretty nice shape. Next, we have another Hall of Famer, Serge Savard. Another Hall of Famer, Ed Giacomin. Love these old hockey goalie cards. Next we have Rogie Vachon. I think I might actually have this card signed. He's a great TTM signer. Hall of Famer. Next we have a few of these trophy cards from the set. Start with a pair of Phil Esposito Art Ross trophy. This one's certainly better centered. Show the backs. out of order. All right, so I have a pair of Bernie Perrant Vezina Trophy. Again, this one's better centered. Another Hall of Famer. And he also won the Conn Smythe. All right, next we have Butch Goring. I've picked up quite a few autographs of Butch Goring over the last couple weeks. Next we have the great Dave Schultz. I think I already have this card, but I think it's kind of beat up. This one's in better shape. Next we have a couple of playoff highlight cards, I guess. 73-74 quarterfinals. New York Rangers, Montreal Canadiens. And we have the semifinals, Blackhawks, Bruins. And next we have the finals, Flyers, Bruins. And we have the Clarence Campbell Trophy. All right, next moving on to 75-76. Some more playoff highlight cards. We have the finals, Philadelphia, Buffalo. Looks like card number 1 in the set. Next we have the quarterfinals. Isn't that Bobby Clark? I think it is. Philadelphia, Toronto. All right, next we have Hall of Famer Johnny Busick. I have this card autographed. Fantastic TTM signer. Another Hall of Famer, Yvonne Cornway. Another Hall of Famer, Rod Gilbert. And another Hall of Famer, Brad Park. Another great TTM signer. Chuck Arneson. Ron Schuck. Next we have a few team cards. Vancouver Canucks. Next we have the New York Rangers. There's quite a few Hall of Famers on this photo. Ed Giacomin, Rod Gilbert, Brad Park, Jean Rattel. And then Rick Middleton was a really nice player. It was a nice team. Next we have the New York Islanders. Denny Potvin. Next we have the Toronto Maple Leafs. And there are a few Hall of Famers on this team. Lanny McDonald, Borje Salming, Darryl Sittler. And we have the California Golden Seals. Next we have Don Luce. Stan Weir. Reg Leach. Pat Quinn. Next we have Len Frigg. Jim Watson. Simon Nolet. Might have mispronounced that. Bill Hott. I have a couple of Jim Pappin. Next we have Neil Komodowski. Have a pair of John Gould. All right, so that's all from that year. This is 76-77. We have Jim Rutherford. Again, I love these hockey goalie images. Just seeing the old goalie gear, how much it's changed. It's just incredible to see. Next we have Joe Watson. It looks like this is the second of only 2 cards from this year's set. Next we are moving into 1978-79. The vast majority of this lot was Topps and not O-Pee-Chee. Next we have Rick Blight. Don Murdoch. Gene Carr. A checklist. Unmarked. I love checklists. Next we have Gary Howitt. Joe Watson. Next we have a pair of Doug Favell for the Rockies. Bill Hott. Barry Beck. Paul Harrison. Next we have a pair of Eric Vile. That's a great image. Next we have Ron Settlebauer. Barry Dean. Stefan Person. Yvonne Lambert. Tom Bladden. Russ Anderson. John Marks. Yeah, the Atlanta Flames. Next we have the Boston Bruins. This next card, whoever used to own this card must not have been a Montreal Canadiens fan, because this one has literally a fold right down the middle of the card, like he folded the card in half. So, I've talked many times about cards tell a story, and this would be an interesting story to hear about. But a nice card anyway. Yeah, you can tell that's intentional. Somebody folded that card in half. Next we have the Washington Capitals. Next we have Brian Maxwell. Red Berenson. Greg Malone. Paul Holmgren. Don Marcotte. And Wayne Merrick. All right, next, moving on to the 7980 set. And I've actually never owned any cards from this set, and this is kind of an iconic set because of the Gretzky rookie. But I've never owned a card from this set, so it was cool to get a few of these. Starting with this Hall of Famer, Denny Potvin. It's a pretty nice design, too. Love this one, Wayne Stevenson. Just look at that mask. That's fantastic. Wayne Stevenson. Next we have a pair of these. Serge Bernier. Next we have Rick Smith. I'm going to butcher this. Michel Placé. Hopefully that's close to being right. Pair of those. Next we have Rick McLeish. Next we have a pair of Jean Pronovost. Next we have Derek Smith. Don Marcotte. Next we have Chris Maneri. Next we have Paul Holmgren. Next we have Gary Croteau. Croteau. Something like that. Croteau. Gary Croteau. I'll go with that. Next we have Wayne Merrick. Next we have a pair of Peter Mahovlik. Bill Hott. Turnbull. Real Cloutier. The Atlanta Flames. And the New York Islanders. All right, next we have a few of the 1980-81 Topps cards. And I'm not really a big fan of the Topps version of these cards because I'll just go ahead and show you. This right here was a scratch-off section. And on the O-Peaches, there wasn't a scratch-off section, so you could see the player's name. With the Topps version, you actually had to scratch that off to find out who the player was. So, not a big fan of the idea that the Topps decided to use. Definitely prefer the O-Peachy versions of these cards, but we have Pat Boutet. And even on the back, they didn't give you the player's name. It just says Whalers Center. Kind of like on the old basketball games where it would be like Bulls shooting guard 23. But, didn't have a player name, so it's kind of like what these are. Definitely not a fan. So I'm glad there weren't too many of them in this lot. Maybe 20 or so. Next we have Steve Vickers. Next we have Grant Mulvey, team leaders card. Next we have Ivan Boldarev. I'm not sure what's going on with this card. It just looks like it's got some sort of like, I don't know, it almost looks like a computer generated image from the early 90s or something. Next we have Dan Bouchard. Next we have Mark Johnson, USA hockey team, Miracle on Ice. Next, this is a nice player, Mike Palmatier. Next, we have Dave Williams. Check out the shiner on him. That's a hockey player. Next, we have Mark Napier. That's definitely miscut. Next, we have Brett Callaghan. Next, we have Ulf Nilsson. And see, this is the perfect example of why I don't like these cards. This is Bob Lorimer, but it's only partially scratched. So it just looks awful. Next we have Barry Beck. Next we have Gilles Gilbert. Bob Murray. Next we have John Van Boxmeer. Next we have Mike Milbury. Again, it's only partially scratched. Next we have Ron Zanussi. Next we have Kent Nilsson. Next we have Guy Lapointe. Next we have Mike Zook. Next we have Peter McNabb. I'm going to butcher this. This is Bent Gustafsson. Not sure how you pronounce that first name. Next we have Morris Lukowicz. Next we have Ron Stackhouse. Oh, we have another Ron Stackhouse. This one's definitely scratched better. Next we have Bob Miller. Next we have Rene Robert. And the last one is Rick Middleton. And the last group, these are all O-Peachy, and these are 1983-84. There's only 6 cards. I think these are the only O-Peachys that were in the group, but I definitely prefer O-Peachy to Topps with hockey cards. We'll start with a Stefan Persson. Next we have Yaroslav Puzar. Next we have Ivan Boldarev. Next we have Eddie Mio. Richard Brodeur. And the last card from this lot, Kevin McCarthy. I guess not the last card of this lot because I do have the 82 partial set that I have that I'll be showing another week, but the last card of this group of the lot, I guess. All right, so hopefully you enjoyed seeing those. I've had those sitting on my desk for, like I said, about 2 months. And just getting around to showing those on my channel. But the last thing I'll be showing this week is another group of Perez Steele Baseball Hall of Fame art postcards. And this is the 4th series. Now it is not complete. I am missing 4 cards. But I think there were 25 cards in this set. And so I have 21 of the 25. These are the ones that I am missing. Luke Appling, Ted Williams, Stan Musial, and Lou Boudreau. And of course, I'd love to have the Williams and the Musial, but unfortunately, they were not in this group. But there are still some great cards in this set. So let's go ahead and get started. Let me put one of these down and see how much I have to raise my camera. That's actually not too bad. All right, so there we go. Move these over to the other side. So we have John Clarkson. And there's the backs. And all of these should be numbered 7715. Next we have Elmer Flick. Next we have Sam Rice. Next we have Epa Rixey. Next we have Red Faber. Burley Grimes. Miller Huggins. One of the early stars, Tim Keefe. Heine Manouche. John Ward. Pud Galvin. Casey Stengel. This is a great one right here. Branch Rickey. Shown there, signing Jackie Robinson. Love it. Next we have Red Ruffing. Next we have Lloyd Wainer. Kiki Kyler. Next we have Goose Goslin. Joe Medwick. The great Roy Campanella. Stan Kovaleski. Next we have Wade Hoyt. Earl Combs. Ford Frick. Jesse Haynes. David Bancroft. And the last card, Jake Beckley. And there's the checklist. So I'm missing the Luke Appling, the Ted Williams, the Stan Musial, and the Lou Boudreau. But otherwise, I have the full set. I showed Series 3 last week, and I was 3 short on that one. So if I can pick up those 7 total cards, I'll have the complete set through Series 4, which is fantastic. So really happy to have such a great start to completing this set. So that's all I have for you this week. Hopefully you enjoyed the episode. Put this lid back on. All right, there we go. So until next time, thanks for watching the video, and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.